Welcome, Susan.
Good evening, President Logan, Superintendent Allison, members of the board. I certainly hope giddy is a word we can use to describe the budget presentations at some point. I'm afraid we're not quite there today. Tonight is our second presentation as we move forward with our fiscal year 18 budget planning process. My goal this evening is to give you a high-level look back of how we have addressed some of our budget challenges in the past 8 years, as well as a first look at what we've identified as our estimated cost increases as we're moving into fiscal year 18. But first, if we can, let's talk a little bit about what's been going on in Topeka. On Thursday, March 2nd, the Supreme Court ruled that state funding to schools is constitutionally inadequate. I think it is important to note that the Supreme Court did not define what adequate meant, but they did point to several sources that would provide a roadmap for the legislature as it moves forward in its formula planning process. And the Supreme Court gave the legislature until June 30th, 2017 to adopt a new formula to meet these standards. Of course, the legislature was already facing that date with the expiration of the block grant. So that's nothing new. But the takeaway here is this decision does not solve our fiscal year 18 budget challenge. It's a great first step forward, but our primary challenge is that the state doesn't have any money to fund that decision. We're still facing a fiscal year 17 budget shortfall of almost $300 million, a fiscal year 18 state budget shortfall of almost $600 million. Even if there was consensus on a tax plan, if there was a consensus on the formula, we couldn't get money into the pipeline fast enough for fiscal year 18. So that's kind of our challenge related to where the funding is at the state level. And we are definitely well in the waiting game mode. We are essentially waiting for the tax plan. We're waiting for the formula. We can't really move forward too quickly with how we proceed until those pieces fall into place.
Still a lot of discussion even today. You know, the idea, I think, is as we've moved along, it's becoming a little less likely, but still conversation around cuts to this fiscal year. Discussion, the K-12 budget committee today, and trying to look at kind of shuffling the deck chairs of the Titanic. Trying to look at how do you take existing dollars, shuffle them around in a way that they might meet the court's take on adequacy. Many of those suggestions begin to hit on the equity portion. For example, a suggestion was made, well, they talked about at-risk and the 25% of students that are performing below standard. And the idea was just have districts spend a specific portion of their local option budget, and it has to be targeted at risk. Sounds intriguing in that you're targeting dollars, but forgetting that because of the continual budget cuts, districts have become, just like Wichita, across the state, the LOB is no longer a local option as much as it is a way to fund base services and necessities. So if you pull that out to target toward at-risk, we create some other issues. So lots of interesting conversation, and we are truly in the waiting game to see what happens, which is part of the reason that tonight our discussion is at that 50,000-foot level, because we don't have any specificity on formula or funding and what that may look like as we move forward. As the clock continues to tick toward June 30th, it puts you in a more difficult position as we work to develop a budget, and it's going to provide very little time from the point that we know to the point that you will have to make decisions about budgets. And that's always difficult. But it gets narrow and narrow as each day goes along based on when you'll have to publish a budget, yet still not have any idea of what the real numbers will look like.
And if it feels like you've been down this road just a few times, you have. This will be the 9th budget year. We've kind of started with a need to address a cut situation. So if we kind of look back a little bit at the history of the district and how they've faced these budget challenges, the cuts did begin in the spring of 2009 as we were planning for fiscal year 10. Cuts were necessary to cover those reductions in state aid and the fixed cost increases that we were looking at. And certainly over the past 8 years, while we've had some funding increases in certain restricted funds, CAPERS being one of those, special ed, bonded interest, the meat and potatoes of our funding, if you will, the base state aid per pupil, took a nosedive in 9 and 10 and has basically flatlined for the past 3 years. And if you want to look at kind of the graphical representation of that, you can see that from the 08 kind of peak to the low in 2011-12, and then a slight bump up, and then we've basically been static now for several years. So what I was curious as far as a cumulative effect of these budget changes, modifications that we've had to make over the years, I went back and looked over some of the budget presentations and cost cuts that we'd made and tried to put it in a one-sheet format. So this is a busy slide, but if you look at the far right corner, between the use of contingency reserve, moving expenses to capital outlay, and various cuts made over the years, we've had to adjust our budget almost $98 million, and that's a significant number, and I think that's a very telling number.
This slide also only tells a portion of the story, and it's something that I think we're going to need to talk about on our ongoing budget discussions, not only this year, but as we move into the next couple of years of budgets, because you look and we talk about the cuts. What isn't as obvious are the decisions we've had to make around deferring and moving dollars within existing budget. So let me give you some examples. We've deferred our maintenance, probably the tune of about $40 million of where we'd like to be over time. We have shifted expenses from general fund to capital, about $14 million. So when the budget does increase, some of those dollars are going to have to be shifted back to general fund. And that's kind of that reoccurring piece. You shift more cost to capital, therefore you don't have the capital dollars to do your preventive maintenance. We've eliminated almost 50 positions at the school service center. That's the equivalent of over 60,000 hours of service per year. That hurts your maintenance and your ability to respond to work orders. So that priority is of course safety and security first. But it means the light that may be out in a restroom, one of several, will take quite a while to repair. When you've eliminated 60,000 hours of work, that's going to have an impact. You look at the conscious decisions we've had to make around salary, around steps and tracks, our textbooks. We'd really like to be on a 5-year cycle. We're closer to an 8 and 10-year cycle. You look at technology. We stretched from a 4-year refresh to a 5-year refresh, and now we're at a 6-year refresh. We have delayed financial upgrades to our software systems, to our work order systems, all those back-end pieces. And the problem with that is, as we get down the line, then we get to a point that the system can't function any longer. And to catch up on 7 or 8 upgrades becomes a much larger, more expensive task. So these are conscious decisions we had to make to be able to keep services to our students and to maintain jobs, and to keep those folks that provide those services in place. And they're going to have to be addressed, probably not in this budget because we really don't anticipate any additional dollars, but as we look out over the next 3 to 5 years, these are some of the areas we're going to have to reassess and think about, because the first inclination is always going to be, we need to do something in this area or that area, but we're going to have to look across not only our salary line items, but where we've deferred and what we need to do. So this will be an ongoing discussion. I think it's going to be an important one, but one that I don't believe our community or many of our employees understand just how much in those different areas we have had to defer and Band-Aid and use duct tape to keep moving forward, and you can only do that for so long. And after 8 years of that, it's going to have to be addressed in some upcoming budgets.
So what are we looking at for fiscal year 18? The usual players are still around. A utility increase of $500,000, transportation, software, fuel, property casualty. We see that those are typical fixed cost increases that we have every year. We do need to address the continued funding of the step and track that we gave for this year, 2016-17. We did fund this in this year's budget with some remaining year-end cash, and so basically that's one-time money. So as we plan for fiscal year 18, if we don't have that same ability, we're going to have to come up with that as a cost cut issue. So cumulatively, we're looking at around a little over $8 million of just to get to a balanced budget, basically to open the doors. And that doesn't include a decision on the calendar. It doesn't include any 18 wage increases, and it doesn't account for still possible cuts this fiscal year. So remember giddy? No, it's not too giddy, but. So at this point, we will continue to refine those estimates because we really do want a solid figure as far as what we have to address for 18. We will keep a very close eye on legislative action here in the next few weeks. We think we will know a lot more next week and into the following. And we want to come back to you with some information on the calendar survey so that we can start looking at making a decision on that issue. So kind of to recap, the GANA decision supported the need for adequate funding, but we know that any formula that addresses adequacy would require a significant tax increase. Key legislative decisions are needed to finalize the fiscal year 18 budget process, so we are in that waiting pattern, and the district at this point is needing approximately $8.2 million to balance the fiscal year 18 budget, and that is before any calendar decision. Any questions?
You are such a joy to have. We very much appreciate your work, though. We're not shooting the messenger. It's not your fault. But, it scares me when I think we need $8.2 million with not even looking at changing the calendar and not looking at any kind of salary increases. I mean, that's just the bare minimum of what we have to open the doors. And our opportunity to get that kind of money in this year's budget from the state is probably not going to happen.
That's correct.
Any other comments? Well, we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to add one thing. There is a rescission bill coming out of Ways and Means in the Senate, and we're finally going to be able to talk about the budget and the hole that we're in this year. At this time, it does not include a cut to education, but it's widely rumored that there'll be amendments on the floor of up to 2%. So again, I think we need to make sure that you're in touch with your legislators, the senators, that what that would do even at this late date. My concern with it is that they weren't interested in an 8-week retroactive tax increase, but they're okay. Some of these are okay with a 9-month retroactive cut, of this nature, and that just is not right. And again, that cut would give us less resources going forward into next year. So I think that'll happen on Thursday on the floor, and it could happen very quickly. So if you haven't contacted your legislator, I would definitely do that right away on the Senate side, not necessarily the House.